There's a lot of JavaScript frameworks, and some of them are pretty good, including Elysia, which is a server-side JavaScript framework built for building APIs that make it really easy, and they do a really good job. There's extra bonuses as well by running with the bun runtime and providing one of the fastest possible experiences. When you're building a web framework, you want a really fast web server so you can get the most out of the hardware that you've leased or purchased. Elysia does this, and they do a really good job when it compares to ease of use from a developer experience perspective. It's seamless. It's really great. Before we jump in, I just wanted to mention that there was a really beautiful CSS gradient that was animating. It's kind of hard to see because it's light in the background. The colors are all pastel. It was destroying my laptop. I could not record anything. I had to turn it off. I opened up the Chrome Inspector. And if you go to ElysiaJS.com, you'll see that there's this just really slowly animating gradient that's moving, and it is very nice. My laptop could not handle it. It was just overkill. All the CPU spiked up and had to get rid of it. So we won't see that on the video recording, but if you do want to check it out, it's kind of pretty. The whole point of Elysia is that framework to make it just as easy as possible to build web server REST APIs. They do a really good job. It's really great. And there is something that we need to talk about here. We have to talk about this. 21 times faster than Express. There are some gotchas. It says supercharged by bun runtime, sure, the static code analysis and dynamic code injection. Being one of the top performing JavaScript frameworks comparable to Go and Rust, there's a whole bunch of gotchas here. We really have to walk through this. It does look appealing from a 2.45 million requests per second. That's so many requests per second. It is real data, so let's not say that anything is faked here, but it is remarkably misleading. We do need to know that this test specifically is built on measuring requests per second from the TechEmpower benchmark round 22 just last year, in plain text. Here's the deal. The whole thing that this is being tested for is how fast the user runtime application can communicate with the kernel to generate TCP packets to respond back to the client. Now, you can get really fast results if you just continuously can flush a buffer directly to the kernel so it can generate TCP packets. You can get that really fast. But from a practical standpoint, it doesn't really matter that much because it's just static text. So it's kind of a tough comparison. Also, because we're getting some advantages with bun and some multi-core capabilities, we're noticing that we can get more requests per second when compared to Node and Express, which these are pretty good numbers. Don't get me wrong, they are pretty good numbers, but they're probably stuck in a single core situation. There's also one other thing that you really have to pay attention. Most REST APIs are going to be accessing data from a database of some kind. Once that happens, all of these numbers will drop. Every single one, including this one, will drop to the same result, the same output speed. So from 2.4 million requests per second, even from 100,000 requests per second, they'll all drop down to maybe 40,000 requests per second. Every single one of these servers, because now you're accessing a data layer that is the new bottleneck. And this bottleneck will slow down those API calls per second that you can get on a limit. So having this level of performance doesn't really matter too much. It's great that it's lightweight, but it doesn't make sense to really consider it as a major benefit for the majority of the use cases that you're going to have for web server application developments. Let's actually take a look at the TechEmpower benchmark really quick. So we can see here's the full list. There is a screenshot here, and it is built on a 14-core with hyperthreads. So you get, I guess, 28 cores, a Xeon CPU at 3.2 gigahertz, 32 gigs of RAM, dedicated 10 gig Ethernet switch. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good server spec there. Then we can see here that we do have some web servers that are up in the 7 million range. Pre-generated text per second response. This is only testing how fast a web server can dump its buffer to the kernel through a kernel API. That's all this is testing here. That's really, Literally all it says is how fast can we do it? How many cores can we use all the cores on the box to spin up all the buffer dumps to the kernel APIs, so that way they can generate TCP packets. That's all we're really testing here. How fast that user application, right? So in this case, Elysia will be the application in the user space. How fast can it dump the buffer? And it is here up here. So we've got like 7 million as the baseline, and Elysia would be, it doesn't show up on this list because this is the top 50. Though it doesn't really matter, because every single one of these, once you put them into the real world scenario, they're all going to drop down based on your data layer. There'll be some other bottleneck to worry about. That the good news is, with Elysia, it is fast enough that you can almost be sure that its runtime and all the other checks and things that it does isn't going to slow you down. It's not a bottleneck concern. That said, also, these other things are not going to be a bottleneck concern necessarily either, because, again, the data layer is going to be the thing that slows you down. Here's the best part of Elysia JS running on Bun. It's not actually those things. It's not that it's fast and performant and it runs really well for your applications. It's really this part right here where we see how easy it is to get started. Look at this. I mean, technically, this is basically 2 lines of code. Yes, we do have some extra character returns here, so that way it's easier to read. It's really cool. Look at this. So you can respond with plain text. So here's a hello world. This is probably close to what the benchmark is, what we were seeing up here. It's just responding with a plain static text hello world. You also can have a JSON object, which is really powerful. I like that. And it will auto detect based on the data type and respond to the end user's request. You can also pass in a function that captures parameters. This is great. I like this. This is really powerful. So you've got an anonymous function here with the parentheses, and then an object that represents the data that's going to be exposed, and you get this ID through the user ID. That is beautiful. This is, it's going to be difficult to get any better than this. This is amazing. Minimal syntax. I love it. Oh, it's so good. This is what is the current standard that we should all base our APIs off of. If we're going to be building off of a framework, they all need to be this simple. It's fantastic. I have to say, this is the strongest aspect to Elysia, and its ability to provide a really powerful user experience using all the language's capabilities with type safety built in. But additionally, just the syntax alone is phenomenal. This is great. We scroll down here through type safety. There is some built-in extras. So it says hover on me. So what we get here is the body is expecting a string, essentially. And so you can see the string of the body, and there's username. I don't know where username. Oh, neat. Oh, check this out. Okay. So based on this T, where's T? Where's T defined? Oh, T is up here. Oh, interesting. What is T? JavaScript type builder. Oh, interesting. There's some magic going on here. We check this out. It will let us know what to expect. Okay, so we are looking to expect. So this helps in terms of user input validation and data types, because any user can post data of any kind to an endpoint. And what's great about Elysia, it comes built in with this extra type checking framework that makes it really seamless. So it helps you write less code because you don't have to worry about validating the types in the data types. So that is powerful. And then we get Swagger and Open API support. This is really cool. Check this out. So you can import essentially any Open API spec that you want and directly feed it into the Elysia server framework, and then just start hosting the data immediately. Look, like all you have to do is specify Swagger. So what is interesting is you can specify the spec, though it needs to go further from here. Usually you're going to want, from controllers. Neat. Okay. So you will need to specify a controller layer. The idea with Swagger is just a specification in OpenAPI, right, is a specification of what your API looks like from a REST perspective. It's going to say what type of data we're looking for, what endpoints are available, what HTTP verbs and methods are available. All that will be represented in the spec. However, your server still needs to operate based on that. The Swagger will help identify what those routes are, but you still need to provide the actual functionality in the web server. So this looks like it's pretty straightforward from that perspective. This is kind of neat. Okay, all right. So you would define your users and feed, which would be part of the spec. Here's your you would use the Swagger, and then you throw in your, okay. This, ooh, let's hover on these. Here we go. Yeah. All right. Okay. So this would be the Swagger data. I'm familiar with this now. Okay. You can get users. You probably can get set users and post users. That makes sense. So standard REST API things. And of course, end-to-end type safety, we walk through here, and it has all these extras to check to prevent any errors with these T's, with the type safety, the T object that you would import here from Elysia. That's pretty powerful. I like that. And it works with that. Essentially, what extras would come? Yeah, we get GraphQL, Swagger, TRPC, Vite, JWT, JSON Web Token, WebSockets, Logger, Elysia Auth, and Clerk. And they've had a lot of contributors over the years. It's pretty amazing. So I can say Elysia is now at the point where it is a very solid web server framework that is performant, it's fast, and it provides a really good user experience. This is the best part, is this right here, the developer experience. And then it is also a bonus that it has a excellent performance. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the Elysia JavaScript web server framework that is just the syntax side of things, where we take a look at what your developer experience is going to be. Looking at the baseline here, it's a very simple hello world, get started scenario. Really powerful. This is so good. I love this. It leverages the language to its capacity. So we're running in TypeScript here, in JavaScript world. It's phenomenal. They make it really easy. So let's just take a look. Let's break this down line by line. So we've import Elysia, which is our web server framework, and then we create a new web server framework. It's really cool. This is only like 2 lines of code essentially. So yeah, there are some character turns to help for readability, of course. So we've got Elysia here, new Elysia, and then we're going to say .get / and then we're going to pass in an anonymous function. So you can see we have parentheses and then an arrow to a string here. And that's just the string, is hello Elysia, that will provide the response to / API call. So if an API call comes in with just the /, then it's going to execute this line of code here, and it's going to return this string. And you can see there's a nice little example here. So say you're running to localhost port 3000, and then you issue an API call, just a get HTTP method against this endpoint. You're going to get a text response, hello Elysia, and that's it. It's really seamless, really easy. And if you wanted to, you don't have to put an anonymous function in here. You can just put another function's name in here and then run that code either in a controller somewhere or just somewhere else in this main file. So it's fantastic. It allows you to be organized and clean and simple, all with just the syntax of the language. It's wonderful. I love this. And it knows if you're passing back any like what kind of data you're passing back. So if you are passing back JSON and you return an object, it will JSON encode, JSON stringify the response for you. So this is it's fantastic. I love it. So let's take a look at this next line here. Now we're getting a little more complicated. So we're saying any get API calls to /user / ID is going to execute this line of code here. So it'll ignore the other lines of code and it'll only execute this one. Here's our anonymous function. Inside, we have a parameter of an object that is asking for params and then ID. So we can see that it's going to be referencing this ID. Really, actually pretty easy to read and understand here. And then it's going to populate a variable within our anonymous function called ID. So this is great. So this brings ID into scope based on what was specified here by the users issuing API calls to my server. So if I say /user/1, then we know that I'm going to respond with the ID number. And then the response is just, what is it? Is it going to be a string? It's going to be a string. So there you go. So then if I said /1,000,000 or /hello, blah, 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 it would print out that, because this data that's being passed into the second argument in the path will be populated here, and that's what responds, sort of like an echo server scenario. Now we're taking a look at the third line of code here, and this is a post HTTP method. So it's going to expect that the HTTP verb is post, and you've got /form, which is the path URL endpoint essentially, and then you get the whole body, which we don't is an unknown, and so we're also going to echo out the body, which is going to be unknown. Probably going to be like these days it'll be JSON, probably some sort of JSON object, and then that's all this does, is it just accepts post data and then allows you to echo out post data. That's pretty easy. So then if we take a test here and we say /form through the test, they're passing this JSON object, hello Elysia, as JSON, and so that is the data that's being posted. It's great. Easy to read, easy to understand. The last line of code here is listen 3000. 3000 is going to be the port number. You only have so many port numbers that it could be. So what is 65,000 in that range? It has to be usually above 1024 and below 65,000. That's usually the range. The common local server that you'll be using is port 3000, because it's above 1024, because everything below 1024 is a port that's typically reserved for operating system ports, and so you need to have elevated user permissions to access those ports, and nobody wants that. No, from a security perspective, you avoid that, and that's why we have a high port number here, and that's usually a common standard that we have today with web app servers, and the port number that we select. The Elysia JS JavaScript framework has a really powerful set of features that we can use in this cheat sheet. We're going to do, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look and read some of the documentation. We'll walk through it. In this case, we're looking at the cheat sheet documentation. Let's actually just walk through it. That's the whole plan, this whole deal. We want to walk through this cheat sheet. Here's a quick overview of common Elysia patterns. So we look at just the basic hello world. It's so seamless. I love this. I love how simple it is. Here it is, a literal hello world. Import Elysia from Elysia. New Elysia get / is going to be your verb, your path, and then you pass an anonymous function with no parameters. Right, so you get these parameters in hello world. So it's just going to respond with text against the / endpoint, and then you listen import 3000. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Can this get simpler? Not really. You cannot get much more simple than this. They made it super clean. You might be able to eliminate the word new, because you don't necessarily need that. So that is something that could be simpler, though that's fine. Like, I'm not making much of an improvement by eliminating one of the keywords in JavaScript. They specify us the opportunity to create a custom HTTP method. Now, in the REST world, if you're making a RESTful API, you won't be doing this. You want get, put, patch, post, and delete. Those are going to be the typical RESTful HTTP methods that you're going to use. They're pretty standard. Though if you wanted to, you can specify your own. So if you wanted to specify an im search, whatever that is, you can, or your own. Elysia is what they should have put here in all caps. You can basically put anything you want here, and then that will go into the text section in the header of the HTTP request from the client. And then it will route, which is really powerful. It'll route here based on the method. So the reason why we got get, put, and post here, because they're standard methods. But if you want to create your own, like msearch, for example, and then /hi, and then it's just a regular, response handler here in this case. So there's nothing else magical about it. That's really powerful. That's pretty great. Actually, I'm kind of curious to see what's in this route here really quick. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Neat. So there's like an msearch. So say we did an msearch, for example. Yeah, that's it's no different than any of the others. This is just text. It's there to make your life easier if so you want it to be so, or you can ignore it entirely. You don't need to worry about it. And then walking through their path parser parameters, they make it as simple as it can be as well. I really like this. It's clean and simple. So you've got the .get, which is HTTP method, and then you've got /ID, /:ID, of course. And then you specify the params and ID to extract the ID directly into scope for your anonymous function. Or you can pass in a regular function name here, and it does the same thing. It's phenomenal. It's so easy to read. It makes sense. It's using the syntax of the language, so you're not fighting with a framework's, other frameworks. You'll have to do a lot of extra work, sort of, follow the rules of the framework. And this doesn't. You don't have to. You just get to use the syntax of the language, which makes Elysia that much better than all the other frameworks. And you can see here that they also support what looks like a wildcard character. So if you have /, like for example, they say rest here, /rest, you can specify a glob character, a star symbol, which is, a wildcard that says everything beyond this, I want to capture that and run it through this path here, this route. And then I want it just to respond with, in their example, they just have, some plain text here, static text is rest. It's fantastic. Isn't that great? It's so good. Of course, I'm curious. You don't get any automatic, URL parsing from that perspective. Though I guess you might not need it if you're going to be using a wildcard character there. You can return JSON from any of your API responses just by returning an object. That's it. That's all you have to do. It's using the syntax of the language. That's the way it should be. It's easy to read and it follows the syntax. It's fantastic. Oh, you can return a file, so you can read using bun .file to load in a file, and then you can pass back. Oh, interesting. How does this work? I'm actually kind of curious because we're returning JavaScript, and we said hello, and we say Elysia in a string, and then image, and then a file. Is this going to base64 encode it? What's going to happen? The response must be a one-level deep object in order to return a file as form data in a response. Interesting. It doesn't give us any more data than that. So, I mean, this is how you would go about doing it. I assume that this is going to just simply, I don't know what this is going to, I really don't know. What is the response? Is it going to be the actual file and everything else around it doesn't matter? Like, what do we get? Or is this really going to be JSON data and it's going to pass in some base64 encoded string here? I don't know. This is not obvious to see what's happening here. Elysia has some really powerful lifecycle hooks, which essentially means that you can, for every API call that comes in, there are a series of phases that occur during the request response cycle. So you can say on request, on before request, on beforehand. Like which options do we have here? So we have on request. So essentially that allows us to say we received a request and allows us to log. These are utility functions that you're going to be able to use to do just general utility on the server itself, because the application server. So you're going to want to be able to log what the request was, and this might be where you do it. It'd be nice to be able to get some parameters or something available to us here. We probably do. Do we get anything? It's not being helpful. This hover tooltip is not helpful. Called on every request. Yeah, that is obvious, right? So every single request that comes in, this on request will get called. We got before handler. And an after handle. That's kind of nice. So, that is pretty cool. So you got, so it's a standard, right? On, before, and after. Oh, neat. Okay. So they have some nice backward compatibility features here, such as like a redirect built directly into the framework. So it makes it a lot easier, so you don't have to worry about returning a specific status code with a location header. They do that for you with a redirect. You just say that, you give yourself access to a redirect function, which gets made available through the scope of your function, and then you just return redirect and then where you want it to go. That's actually pretty powerful, because often when we're building APIs, we have older versions of code that we still want to support, but the endpoint changes. So you just pass in a redirect, and then it follows on forward from there. And there's a nice WebSocket integration as well. The WebSocket here, we see Elysia, it's just the same as before, and then you just say .ws, and then you specify the path, and that's it. They make it really straightforward and simple. Isn't this great? And so you just pass in the on message event handler, and then you can say a respond ws.send. Wow. This is actually pretty clean and simple. So this is a little mini Echo server. And of course, I'm familiar with this as well, being that it's WebSockets. This is like what PubDump provides, is that WebSocket global distributed server technology that allows you to just offload all of your WebSocket traffic onto our CDN. This is something that is really powerful that they baked into Elysia. So that way you can have some bidirectional communication built into your web server. So it is really powerful. They made it super clean. Can you make it cleaner than this? Not really. They just do a really good job. I have to say, Elysia has done a fantastic job overall at just making the developer experience really, really easy and seamless. And it's just so easy to read. The code is simple. And if you haven't used Elysia yet, definitely take a look and check it out.